A modern $2,000 turntable and a vintage deck that sold for scrap metal money at last month's estate sale can genuinely sit on the same shelf, and in more than one measured comparison, the vintage unit wins outright on the numbers that actually matter: wow and flutter, rumble rejection, tone arm mass matching. 5 vintage turntables you can genuinely still find for well under $100 today, every one of them built during an era when manufacturers competed on raw engineering rather than industrial design and marketing copy. This isn't nostalgia bait or wishful thinking. These are specific, real models with specific, real, measured specifications that plenty of modern decks costing 20 times as much simply don't match, and every single one of them is still sitting in estate sales and thrift store shelves waiting for someone to actually recognize what they're looking at. Here's the frame before the list starts. A $2,000 modern turntable is frequently paying for furniture-grade industrial design, a premium plinth finish, boutique branding, and streaming connectivity, features that genuinely add real cost to the retail price, without necessarily improving the actual mechanical accuracy of how the stylus tracks a groove. The 5 decks on this list were engineered in a completely different commercial environment, one where the motor, the tone arm geometry, and the platter mass had to genuinely justify their own cost on a spec sheet next to a dozen direct competitors fighting over the same customer, with essentially no room to hide a weak motor behind an attractive plinth finish the way a modern lifestyle-focused turntable sometimes can. That competitive pressure produced genuinely excellent mechanical engineering at prices that look almost absurd by comparison today, and understanding exactly why that gap exists is the entire point of this list. Number 5. Independent restoration guides specifically covering budget-tier turntables from this era consistently single out the BIC 940's tone arm bearing quality as noticeably above what its original retail price would have predicted, a detail that becomes obvious the moment a technician actually disassembles the tone arm assembly and compares it against contemporaneous budget competitors sourced from the same general production period. BIC, or British Industries Company, built the 940 in the early 1970s, specifically to compete in the crowded budget to mid-range turntable market, and the design used a genuinely well-engineered belt drive system with a dynamically balanced tone arm, a detail budget competitors of the era frequently skipped to save on manufacturing cost. The 940's tone arm bearing assembly used low-friction gimbal bearings rather than the simplified pivot designs common on cheaper turntables, delivering tracking accuracy that period reviewers specifically praised as competitive against turntables costing considerably more at the time of its original release, a genuinely impressive result for a model positioned firmly in the budget category. BIC's reputation suffered specifically because the company marketed primarily through mass-market retail channels rather than dedicated hi-fi shops, a positioning that had nothing to do with the actual engineering inside the chassis, but permanently affected how seriously collectors took the brand for decades afterward. The exact same reputational penalty that shows up repeatedly across nearly every name on this entire list. Clean 940 units today typically sell for $40 to $80. Genuine gimbal-bearing tone arm precision for a price that wouldn't cover the shipping on most modern audiophile decks, let alone the deck itself. The known weakness is the idler-style motor coupling on early production units, which can develop speed inconsistency with age, though a simple belt replacement and motor bushing lubrication, a $20 job for anyone comfortable with basic tools, typically restores original performance completely, bringing a 40-year-old motor essentially back to its original factory-fresh tracking accuracy. Number 4. Sanyo's overall corporate strategy during this specific production era treated component audio as a genuine engineering priority rather than a side project attached to the company's much larger appliance business. And that internal seriousness shows up directly in the specific mechanical choices found throughout the TP-1012's design. Choices that period competitors selling at a similar price point frequently skipped entirely. Sanyo built the TP-1012 in the mid-1970s as part of the company's push into genuinely serious component audio, and the design uses a belt drive motor paired with a static balanced tone arm and an anti-skate mechanism more precisely calibrated than most competitors offered at a similar price point. Sanyo's engineering team specifically tuned the TP KD-1012 suspension system to isolate the platter and tonearm assembly from external vibration, a detail that matters enormously for tracking accuracy on any turntable placed on a shelf that isn't perfectly rigid, exactly the real-world condition most home listeners actually deal with, rather than a perfectly isolated, dedicated equipment stand. Sanyo's broader consumer electronics reputation, built primarily around televisions and general household appliances, meant the company's genuinely competent turntable engineering rarely got the same dedicated audio press attention that more narrowly focused hi-fi brands received during the same era, an attention gap that had everything to do with marketing, budget allocation, and nothing to do with what the company's engineers actually built. Clean TP-1012 units today typically sell for $30 to $70, and the suspension isolation alone represents an engineering detail. Several current sub-$500 modern turntables skip entirely to control manufacturing cost, prioritizing a simpler, cheaper mounting system that transfers considerably more external vibration directly into the tonearm. The known weakness is the rubber suspension grommets, which harden and lose their damping properties with age, a straightforward and inexpensive replacement part for anyone restoring one for daily use, and a job most owners can complete themselves with a basic screwdriver and a replacement grommet kit. If this kind of detail is actually changing how you'll evaluate the next unfamiliar turntable at an estate sale, that's exactly why this channel exists. We break down the turntable and vintage audio market so you can listen smarter and buy with confidence, and a subscribe means more of these value breakdowns reach people before they overspend on modern gear that doesn't measure up to what's already sitting forgotten in someone's basement. Every name covered so far shares the same underlying pattern: real belt drive or direct drive engineering discipline, wearing a genuinely modest, unrecognized badge. 3 turntables left, and the engineering pedigree only gets more serious from here. Number 3. Kenwood's broader engineering reputation from this exact production era, the same reputation this channel has covered extensively when discussing the company's celebrated tuner lineup, extended directly into the turntable division, even when a specific model never received the same dedicated marketing attention as the company's more famous separates. Kenwood built the KD-2070 in the late 1970s, using a belt drive motor and a genuinely well-damped tonearm design. And the company's engineering culture, the same culture responsible for Kenwood's celebrated tuner and receiver lineup from the same era, shows directly in the KD-2070's measured wow and flutter figures, which period testing confirmed as competitive against turntables, costing 2 to 3 times as much at original retail. A genuinely impressive result that speaks directly to how seriously Kenwood's engineering division approached even its more modest, lower-tier product offerings. Kenwood specifically engineered the KD-2070's plinth with internal damping material to reduce resonance transfer between the motor and the tonearm, a detail that directly improves tracking accuracy and reduces audible rumble compared to cheaper, undamped plinth designs, still common on many current budget turntables, sold at a considerably higher price point today. The KD-2070 never became a headline model in Kenwood's own catalog, overshadowed by the company's more heavily marketed receiver and tuner separates, and that relative obscurity within Kenwood's own product lineup is precisely why clean examples remain so affordable today, essentially forgotten by collectors, specifically chasing the more famous Kenwood names that dominate this channel's other lists. Units typically sell for $40 to $90, genuine Kenwood engineering pedigree, for a fraction of what the company's more famous tuners and receivers from the exact same production era now command on the current collector market. The known weakness is the cueing mechanism's damping fluid, which can thicken or dry out over decades, causing the tonearm lift to operate too quickly or too slowly. An easy fix involving a small amount of fresh silicone damping fluid available from any turntable parts specialist. A maintenance item most vintage turntable restoration guides specifically flag as routine rather than exceptional. Number 2. Pioneer's broader engineering reputation through this specific decade rested heavily on exactly this kind of technology trickle-down strategy, taking genuine flagship innovations and finding ways to deliver a meaningful portion of that same performance at a considerably more accessible price point, rather than reserving every advance exclusively for the company's most expensive offerings. Pioneer built the PL-115D in the mid-1970s around a genuine direct drive motor at a genuinely budget price point, a combination that was still relatively unusual at the time, since direct drive technology initially commanded a real cost premium over simpler belt drive designs, and manufacturers frequently reserved it exclusively for their more expensive product tiers. Pioneer's engineering team specifically tuned the PL-115D's servo motor control circuit to deliver speed stability that period-independent measurements confirmed as directly competitive with far more expensive direct drive decks from the same general era, proving direct drive precision didn't have to be reserved exclusively for flagship tier turntables the way most of Pioneer's own competitors still treated it. The PL-115D's direct drive motor also eliminates the belt stretch and belt aging issues that eventually affect every belt drive turntable on this list, meaning a well-maintained PL-115D genuinely requires less ongoing mechanical maintenance than its belt-driven competitors, a real practical advantage for anyone planning to actually use the turntable regularly rather than display it as a collector's piece. Clean units today typically sell for $50 to $90. Genuine direct drive engineering, the same fundamental technology found in flagship decks costing thousands of dollars today, for less than the cost of a single premium phono cartridge on a modern audiophile deck, let alone the turntable it would actually be mounted on. The known weakness is the servo control circuit's aging capacitors, which can cause subtle speed drift over decades. A straightforward recap that most competent technicians can complete in under an hour, restoring the servo circuit's original tight tolerance without requiring any parts beyond a handful of inexpensive replacement capacitors. If you're already recalculating what you thought a $100 turntable budget could actually buy, that's exactly the point of laying this list out this clearly. We break down the turntable and vintage audio market so you can listen smarter and buy with confidence, and knowing which specific vintage names carry real engineering pedigree changes how you shop at every single estate sale from here forward, rather than just walking past the turntable table entirely. One turntable left, and it might genuinely be the single best value on this entire list. Number 1. Technics earns the top spot on this entire list precisely because the SL-B2 represents the clearest, most direct case of genuine flagship engineering discipline applied to a genuinely budget product, backed by a brand whose name recognition today, ironically, works specifically against this particular model rather than for it, since collectors chasing the Technics badge almost universally chase the far more expensive SL-1200 instead. Technics built the SL-B2 in the late 1970s as a genuinely serious belt drive turntable positioned below the company's more famous direct drive SL-1200 lineup, and that positioning is precisely why it gets overlooked today by buyers chasing the more recognizable Technics name rather than evaluating the SL-B2 on its own genuinely excellent merits, dismissed sight unseen simply for not being the specific model everyone already recognizes. The SL-B2 uses a quartz-locked motor control system, technology more commonly associated with Technics' pricier direct drive models, applied here to a belt drive design, specifically to deliver speed accuracy that period measurements confirmed as remarkably close to the company's own flagship performance figures at a fraction of the retail price. A genuinely rare instance of flagship-grade motor control technology trickling down into a considerably more affordable product tier. Technics engineering culture, the same disciplined, measurement-driven approach that made the SL-1200 a 5-decade industry standard, carries through clearly in the SL-B2's tonearm design and overall build quality, using genuinely tight manufacturing tolerances that period reviewers specifically noted as unusual for a turntable positioned this far below the company's flagship lineup, evidence that Technics simply didn't know how to build a genuinely careless product even at a budget price point. Clean SL-B2 units today typically sell for $30 to $70, quartz-locked speed accuracy, and genuine Technics engineering discipline for a price that undercuts the company's own more famous SL-1200 by a factor of 10 or more, on the current used market, despite sharing meaningfully more design DNA with that flagship model than most buyers ever realize. The known weakness is the same belt. Aging every belt drive turntable on this list eventually faces a $5 part and a 15-minute replacement job that restores the SL-B2's quartz-locked precision to essentially its original factory specification. The single cheapest, easiest maintenance item on this entire list relative to the performance it restores. That's 5 vintage turntables genuinely findable for under $100 today. Every one of them measuring specifications that plenty of modern turntables costing 20 times as much simply don't match on a bench. The lesson underneath this entire list is the same one this channel keeps coming back to. Raw mechanical engineering, motor precision, tone arm geometry, platter mass and isolation doesn't automatically improve just because a modern price tag climbed into 4-figure territory, and several of the most genuinely accurate turntables ever mass-produced are sitting forgotten in closets and thrift stores for less than the cost of a nice dinner. None of these 5 brands built a bad turntable trying to hit a budget price point. They simply built genuinely excellent, cost-conscious engineering during an era when that specific combination, real mechanical precision at a genuinely accessible price, was still commercially possible at real manufacturing scale. Something today's 4-figure boutique market has almost no meaningful incentive to replicate at anywhere near the same price point. A well-engineered motor and a properly damped tone arm don't care what decade they were built in, and they don't care what price tag was originally stapled to the box either. They just keep tracking a groove exactly the way they were designed to, decade after decade, waiting patiently in a thrift store bin for someone to actually notice what's actually sitting in front of them. If this list changed which turntable you'll actually look for at the next estate sale, hit subscribe, because we break down the turntable and vintage audio market so you can listen smarter and buy with confidence, one overlooked deck at a time. Drop a comment naming the specific turntable you already own from this list, or the modern deck you'd happily trade straight across for any single name covered here today. See you in the very next one.